And I think that that's where people are so frustrated and they're really impatient, is that they want to just get good at shooting and editing in less than a month. And there's this phase where you need to fail for like a good couple of months and just train your eyes to know where the correct balance is at.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Photo Pros Weekly. I'm Brandon Heiss, and I'm here again with Olivia Tuttle. This week, we're going to take a deep dive with Eli Infante. Now, Eli is a portrait photographer based out of the South Texas area, and welcome to the show, Eli.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you guys for having me. I'm looking forward to the interview.
Awesome. Well, Eli, we always like to start off with folks and just kind of find out how you got into photography. Was it a traditional path? Did you get a camera as a young boy, or is it something that was introduced to you, later on in your life? So how'd you get into photography?
So it was actually my senior year in high school. So I played basketball my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. And it wasn't until my senior year where I decided to get out of basketball. And I got into this class, which was called multimedia and graphic design. And that's where I was introduced to Photoshop, video editing, 3D Studio Max. And that's what kind of jump-started me to get into photography, was that Photoshop course. I actually was into Photoshop before photography, and that's what led me to end up picking up a camera so that I can manipulate images. When I first started off, I just loved taking pictures of anything, texture. And when I was first introduced to Photoshop, I was literally going through every single filter, every single menu, every single blend mode. I was just completely addicted to Photoshop when I first started.
So you were killing all your images. You were making them look like crap, right?
Exactly. The good old overlay blend modes, the invert, and the artistic filters that they had back in the early 2000s. So for sure, man. And it wasn't until I got into, when I was in college, I took my photography class and I slowly started getting into photography. I remember my first book that I bought was Scott Kelby's digital photography book. And this is before YouTube was a thing. I mean, you had to learn everything through books. There was no YouTube University, so it was a lot more difficult to learn. But I remember that was one of the first books that got me into photography. And then also Brian Peterson, there was another one on exposure. And I remember when I was first learning photography, it was so difficult to understand the exposure triangle because I'm a video guy, I'm a visual guy, but reading it in books, it took me a lot longer to learn the whole exposure process.
Well, good. That's interesting. And how would you say your photography career has grown since the Photoshop manipulation days when you're just trying every filter under the sun?
Well, it wasn't until when I got hired as a teacher. So if you all didn't know, I'm a full-time teacher. So I teach photography and video in high school. And as I was being asked to take more and more portraits at the school, because a lot of people don't understand is, yes, I work with models, but a majority of my work, even though I don't post it, it revolves around students, faculty members. And I soon had to start teaching myself, how do I communicate with subjects that don't normally get photographed, whether that be students or teachers. Teachers are the worst ones. They are the ones that never want to get photographed. They're the ones that roll their eyes at me. I have to play it cool. I forgot who I was telling. I think it was in the B&H depth of field when they were interviewing me. And I was telling them photography is about like 90% psychology and 10% technical, because when you're working with people like teachers, you have to, throw in jokes and keep them calm and try to get the picture done within like 2 or 3 minutes, because they do not want to get, photographed. So the progression was, as I was teaching, I started getting into this portrait stuff. I was like, you know what, this is pretty cool. Like I started off using just little speed lights. I think the Young Uos, and then I was with the Alien Bees, and I started hanging out with my friends, and I really got a passion for it about 5 to 6 years ago. So I've been really focused on this portrait style that I've been doing, which is the high speed sync, off camera flash. It's been going on for about 5 to 6 years, but what led up to it was photographing the students, the teachers, and I do all of the sports as well at my school. So from soccer to basketball to volleyball, you name it, powerlifting. That's where it kind of jump started to where I am now, actually.
Yeah, awesome. So you're doing action sports photography, and then you're also doing portraits of. Are you also
Hmm.
the school photographer, where you're responsible for yearbook, or is do you hire out for that?
That's a different teacher. We do have a yearbook teacher, but I do help them out with a lot of the content, especially this year with COVID, because we don't have students on campus right now. And so the students are not allowed to go to the games and photograph. So it was basically left the yearbook teacher who that's a big responsibility. So I've been helping him out. I've been going to a lot of the games to go photograph. And I'm actually starting to have a little passion for sports photography. It's something that I never do. And so it's been really interesting going out there shooting. But also developing content like the portrait stuff that I was telling you about with the powerlifting, the volleyball, just giving the yearbook teacher extra content to put in the yearbook. Because this year, out of all the school years, is completely different than what we're used to.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So, and I think you being a teacher, that's very interesting. You're the first teacher we've had on the podcast, um, but it makes sense that you're teaching photography. Now, you mentioned something earlier about teachers are the worst, and they're difficult to post. And you said you have to work with them, and what are some tips
Oof.
that you have for photographers? And I guess this doesn't just apply to teachers, but anybody who may feel uncomfortable or things like that. What are your tips with working with those folks and making them feel comfortable and getting a great image?
That's a fantastic question. So when I do work with clients or even teachers for that matter, I always try to play music for sure. So I always bring a JBL speaker. So if I'm working with a client, I'm for sure the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slow down and I'm going to talk to them even before I start busting out the camera. One of the easiest ways to get them to talk is just ask them, "Hey, what music do you like?" And right off the bat, that's an easy conversation I can get into. So they're not thinking about the photo shoot. You're playing music that they like, because the last thing you want to do is play music that you like,
Right.
and they have no interest whatsoever. You would be surprised at how relaxed they start to feel with the music. You can start throwing in jokes. But as far as the teachers, the joke that I always say, whenever I photograph them, whenever they're coming into my room, I'm just like, okay, guys, it's only going to hurt for a little bit. Okay. So I kind of pretend like I'm a doctor, and never fails. They always start laughing, and you can kind of just see the tension kind of dissipate briefly. But you definitely, when you're photographing people like teachers, I always like to crack jokes for sure. And I'm always trying to constantly be talking to them because and I've worked with models and they've told me this before. Sometimes they've worked with photographers where they don't talk at all. And it's the most awkward thing when the photographer is just shooting
Right.
and they're never talking back and forth. It is so important. And I think it's one of the most underrated skills. And I think that that's why practicing is so important because a lot of people tell me, it's like, oh, Eli, how are you getting like these awesome images all the time and so forth? I'm like, guys, like, trust me, I've failed a bunch of times, but because of the practice, I already know where the light placement is going to be. I already know my settings. So, reality, when I'm setting up a shot, I'm more focused on the communication and trying to get them to pose exactly what I want. All the other technical stuff is I'm not even thinking about that. I'm thinking all about communication and the pose
And
at that
and
point.
that's where that psychology aspect of the whole photo shoot comes into play, and why it is so important. It makes me wonder. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think you have to be a little bit more extroverted to be a photographer, just in general?
I don't think so, but I know for sure it does help. And I think that you definitely have to respect the person and be present with them. And especially if they're talking to you and they're opening up, because sometimes you can get somebody that's shy that does want to start having a conversation with you. And if you start ignoring them and you're panicking and looking at your settings, you come across as rude sometimes. So you need to kind of keep that eye contact with them, need to have those facial expressions. I know that it's very difficult right now because with COVID, I'm having to wear a mask. And I always tell the models this, I'm like, one of the biggest advantages that I have is I love to smile when I'm shooting, and right now it looks like I'm very serious because of the mask right now. But when we're able to shoot again without masks, I'm always constantly smiling. I'm always constantly keeping that eye contact and always trying my best to keep present with them and not worrying about settings and so forth, because I think that goes a long way with making your subject feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Well, I think you need to get one of those see-through masks that doesn't fog up.
It's funny because one of my coworkers has one of those, and it fogs up, and I just, man, I'm sorry, but it looks gross.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm with you. It kind of gets disgusting.
So would you say that
It
those
does.
connections with your models like inspires you and keeps you in photography?
Absolutely. And not only does it keep me inspired, but it helps the models want to work with me again and also suggest me to other people, whether that be a makeup artist, whether that's a stylist, or another friend that they might have. You wouldn't believe at how many people that I've been able to connect with because they had a great experience with me, whether that's a client, whether that's working with a model, or even a makeup artist. You always want to have your network in a strong environment because they're going to refer you to clients, models, and makeup artists. So you want to leave a good first impression for sure.
Now, Eli, let me jump a little bit to your photography and some of the work that you're doing. If you're not following Eli on Instagram, I mean, you're missing out. There, I think most people are following you these days. You've got quite the following on Instagram, but I see a really cool variety of locations. When I look through your Instagram page, is there one that stands out to you as a favorite? I mean, you've got a really I've been down there down in South Texas, I'll say McAllen, but South Texas, um,
Hmm.
and you've got a very diverse, you know, set of architecture, environments. We filmed at an abandoned. I don't even know what that was. What was it? An abandoned factory almost.
Yeah, I would call it an abandoned factory for
So,
sure.
but do you have a favorite? I mean, you've got so many cool
Oh
looks
man.
in your work. Anything that comes to mind as a favorite location, or maybe just more so what you tend to be attracted to? Is it bright colors in the background? Is it um, diffused lighting setups? What keeps bringing you back for and keeps your attention and keeps you excited about your work?
So for sure, there's two things that I'm always looking for. That location that you're talking about, the FAR location, it was in FAR and it was an abandoned, I guess we'll call it a factory. But whenever I'm looking for locations, what I'm looking for is as much variety as possible, but also areas that I can use to set the base for a pose. I think that's like the most important thing when I'm looking for locations is like, where can I place my subject? Could they be leaning on something? Could they be sitting on something? Could they possibly lean on something? Or can I use geometric shapes? And that far location is one of my favorites. But the one that, as you were asking me that question, the one that jumped out to me was actually one that I did in McAllen, and it was across a park, and it was just this abandoned lot. I've never seen anybody photograph there. And what was cool about it is that it had this little platform of like cement that you could use. It had some cactus, it had some tall grass, and it's still to this day one of my favorite photo shoots because we styled it, but it offered so much variety because it was a tree that was kind of broken down. And if you look at some of my work, it's Fernanda actually. She was there when we did the Westcott when you guys came down to film me. It was actually one of the first times I worked with Fernanda, but she was wearing this beige hat and this beige suit, and I styled that entire outfit. But I got lucky also because that location, what's great is that there was some tall grass as well. And if you've seen my work, you know that I love beautiful sunsets. And so this specific location, not only did it have enough variety with the cement platform, that's where I started off. And I started off with a couple of poses there. And then I moved to the tree, which is still to this day one of my favorite all-time photographs where she's sitting on the tree and she has some flowers in her hand. And then we moved to the tall grass. And I specifically set up those shots in that order, knowing that I was just praying that hopefully that we were going to get an awesome Texas sunset. And sure enough, we did. And so I had her sit down. And on that specific shot, what I loved about it is that going back to the sunset, I always look for locations where there's not going to be any distractions in the background. Typically, sometimes you'll have wires in the background, poles, houses, buildings. This one was a clear, beautiful sunset. And it was probably, and it's funny, me and my friend Marco talk about this still to this day, that was probably one of the best sunsets that we've ever seen. And I captured one of my second all-time favorite shots there. And I remember the Sony. Alpha Universe, the blog, they actually reposted that and they made a blog about that photograph. So I was really proud about that. So I think that location is probably one of my all-time favorites because I've only used it about twice. But something about that location that day specifically, just everything seemed to work out perfect. And it was just like three random little spots, all close connected with one another. So if you want to see those pictures, if you check the Instagram, my Instagram, I have those pictures. And then I think I even made a YouTube video talking about that location as well.
So if you're watching on YouTube, we'll make sure we show those photos. If you're listening, make sure you check the YouTube video, and you'll be able to see those at this point in time. So Eli, are you a prop guy? Do you like implementing props with your subjects when you're shooting portraits, or are you? What's your stance on that?
Absolutely. That's a big part of my workflow. And going back to working with subjects, whether it's a model, whether that's a client, giving the hand something to do is super important. One of my client shoots that I did, he was actually one of my students. He was a senior, and he brought instruments. He loved playing music, so he brought a microphone. He brought his like little mini piano. I don't know what the actual instrument's called, but this little mini piano. And those are actually some of my favorite client shoot photographs. But it just helps the subject feel more relaxed. And anytime that I can, depending on the theme, I'm definitely going to try to do props. And speaking of which, today I'm actually going to go to do a photo shoot out at Sal del Rey. And me and Marco went out shopping yesterday. We went to Hobby Lobby. And what's cool about this Sal del Rey location is that the water's really thin out there. And it's perfect for wide shots. We're just hoping today we get this beautiful, awesome sunset. And we're going to use this red dress, but we were like, we need something. So going back to the question about the prop, we're like, we just don't want her standing there in the water. Like that'll be a cool shot, but how can we elevate this? How can we make it a little bit easier on her and ourselves to give her something to do? So what we did is we bought this long fabric. So she's going to be holding this long red fabric as she's out there. And so that's going to give the image some motion, and that's going to give her hand something to do. So we'll see what we come up with later today. I'm super excited for that photo shoot.
Well, it also brings up to a point, like if you have a prop, he said his most important thought when he's looking for a location or what he desires in a location is a base, something that a subject can pose on or pose around, and that's where I think props are really valuable. It gives models sometimes things to do with their hands.
Yeah, I think it would relax them a lot more too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
Absolutely.
nothing worse than an uncomfortable model who
Yeah.
doesn't, we all know the phrase from the models, what do you want me to do with my hands?
Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I was going to say, Brandon. And and one of the things, if you're going to use a prop, don't think that you have to use it the whole photo shoot. Use it where you feel like maybe you're running out of ideas, and you just kind of have that extra little toolkit there. Like, oh, you know what? Let's just try it out. Use it for a couple of shots to break up the redundancy, and then just take it out if you don't want to use it for the whole shoot. So those are just some things to think about.
Absolutely. Well, good stuff. So Eli, I'm looking on your Instagram page and I see that you actually have a workshop coming up, that you're going to be out on the road and doing some teaching. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us what that's about. And, are there still openings for some of those classes?
So I am doing my first summer workshop tour outside of Texas. So for the past 2 years before COVID, we did one in Houston and we did one in San Antonio. We were going to do Dallas, but that's when COVID came in and boom, we had to cancel it. But this is the first time we're going to go to Chicago. We're going to go to New York. We're going to go to LA and then also Dallas. And so I've been working really hard on all of the presentation slides for that workshop. So it's going to be an off-camera flash workshop where you're going to learn high-speed sync. I'm also going to start talking about different things like color gels, because that's something that I kind of want to get better at and include. And you'll notice it a lot in my most recent work. I'm slowly throwing in some color gels just to mix it up. I've been working with some different modifiers too. I've been working with projectors, so I do want to make sure that I include some of that in the workshop. and then also some studio stuff. I recently just got a studio about 4 or 5 months ago. So I'm slowly incorporating some studio work also in my work. So it's going to be kind of covering a lot of different content from high speed sync to studio to also color gels. And so day one, all we do is focus on shooting. So we'll have plenty of models. And every time I do a workshop, I always make sure that day one, we're just jam packed with a bunch of shooting and a bunch of different light setups. And then day two, we just focus all on editing. So we're going to get into frequency separation. We'll get into dodge and burn and some color grading. And then on this specific workshop, I'm also going to be talking about some advanced dodge and burn techniques that I don't share on YouTube. So there's things that are just exclusive for this workshop. So I know a lot of people reach out to me about doing one-on-ones with the editing. And I've been telling people I'm reserving some of this exclusive content only for the workshop. So
Really cool. Yeah, no, I saw that and I was excited to see you spreading your wings a little bit, getting out of Texas and sharing all your hidden secrets that makes your work so good.
Awesome. Yes. And so like I said, I'm excited and going, I think you had asked earlier if we're almost sold out. I know Dallas is pretty much almost sold out. I think we have maybe about, I want to say 1 or 2 spots left in Dallas. I know Chicago has maybe about 4 or 3. New York, same thing, about 3 or 4. And then Los Angeles is about 4 or 5. So we should be selling out pretty soon.
All right. Well, we will. I'm sure after people listen to this, you're gonna have
Fill those spots.
Yeah.
Yeah, fill up some more
You'll have a
spots.
waiting list.
Yeah.
You'll have a waiting list after that.
So being in Texas, what are your hobbies? I mean, they have good barbecue, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we got good barbecue down here. So actually going back to my specific hobbies, believe it or not, I love to cook. I love cooking. And so one of my favorite things to cook is salmon. I love salmon and chili. My parents, every single time, they're always telling me to make my chili. And I always make it like around wintertime. We don't really get a lot of cold weather here.
75 degrees down there in McAllen.
So we panic here when it's 40 degrees, 30 degrees. All the parents, faculty at my school were like, should we cancel school? Should we start late? It's 40 degrees, guys. We panic. You know, I know in Ohio that's probably like nice weather for you guys, but over here we panic. We freak out.
To put it in perspective, he is in Texas, and when we say South Texas, you can almost spit into Mexico. I mean, that's how close he is.
Way down there.
You know, when we went down there, you see the palm trees. I mean, you almost feel like you're in Cancun. I mean, there's no resorts, but you get the point. It's warm. So
yeah, there's some locations that I've photographed where you can see the border wall, like
really?
right there.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
wow,
Mm-hmm.
wow.
There's one. It's called the Hidalgo Pump House, and you'll see the border wall right there.
No kidding. Well, yeah. So you cook salmon. What do you like to eat? You like to eat barbecue, though? I mean, Olivia mentioned barbecue.
Oh, yeah.
What was that place we went to? They had some pretty good barbecue.
Oh, the Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. No, barbecues is real popular down here. Speaking of barbecues, actually, my dad just cooked out yesterday. So my dad, he's the one that handles all the barbecue and the cooking and stuff. But man, you can't go wrong with some fajitas and some chicken fajitas. Do you guys have that, or what do you guys call like your meat over there? Oh man, the fajitas.
Oh, we call it fajitas.
Here.
I just don't have
rice
the
and beans,
accent like you.
tortillas.
We have Taco Bell.
Oh, come on, Brandon! Don't tell me that. Come on, man.
I kid. No, yeah, fajitas. I mean, that's yeah, of course. We got fajitas. What do you think, we're living like in a cornfield where all we can eat is burgers and potatoes?
Okay, let me ask you this. What are things in Ohio that are like your staples over there? You know, compared to here in South Texas, you know, fajitas,
Toledo's
the
a
barbecue.
weird
What are
place.
your staples out there in Ohio?
Toledo has this weird, and I think it trickles down from Detroit, this weird obsession with like Coney Island, like hot dogs and chili dogs and things like that. It's
delicious, but weird.
yeah, I mean, it's terrible for you. You know, you'll have a heart attack if you eat that stuff every day at age 40. But that's kind of, I think, what I don't know. Can you think of anything else?
Just the American food, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, traditional. You know, everything else. I mean, I love to barbecue. I love to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably not Texas barbecue. It's not like that open pit. You know, slow cook. it's me going out with a beer at night and flipping hamburgers,
Yeah.
steaks and chicken,
Yeah.
and the traditional
Pouring
stuff.
The
some beer on it.
basics.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Pour a little beer on it, see if it makes it taste any better. So that's funny. No, yeah, the food in Texas. There's something special about it. I like the Austin
Oh yeah.
barbecue, and
Mm.
even the North Texas, like the Dallas Fort Worth kind of barbecue. It's really good down there.
Mm.
Well, cool. So let's kind of wrap up here a little bit. We have a few little quick fire questions for you, Eli, if you wouldn't mind answering.
Awesome.
Just kind of say as short as possible. No explanations really needed. What is one thing that you always like to have available to you in a gear bag, like something you couldn't leave, the home without?
Ooh, gear bag. Hmm. It depends. If we're talking about models, safety pins. Need to tighten up the clothes. I always make sure I have those packed. Safety pins.
Excellent.
Hmm.
That's a good tip. Um, when's the first time you ever used artificial lighting? How many years ago?
6 years ago. 6 years ago.
And so how soon into when you were serious about photography? How soon was that? Was that 2 years into your photography, or when did it click that you really loved artificial lighting?
About 4 years ago. That's when I first started doing high speed sync. Hmm.
Okay, very cool. Do you have a most memorable photo shoot?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go with the one with Betsy, the orange theme, where she's wearing, drinking the orange soda. She has it close to her
Oh yeah.
mouth. Styled that entire shoot, and that location wasn't even supposed to happen. It wasn't even supposed to have the little soda. It was supposed to be a raspa, but it was so. Oh, people might not know what raspa is. Snow cone.
Explain.
Yeah, snow cone. We call them raspas here. But we wasn't even supposed to have that prop. It was a last minute thing that I went to go get that soda can, and then it wasn't even supposed to be that location either. It was just a backup location, and one of my all-time favorite photographs.
Very cool. If you could photograph anyone, dead or alive, who would you photograph?
Ooh, man. I would say the lead singer of Radiohead, Tom York.
Very cool. And the last one, the best piece of feedback, and if you want to elaborate, you can. Best piece of feedback that you've ever received on your photography.
Can you say that again, Brendan?
The best feedback that you've ever received on your photography, whether it be,
Constructive criticism.
yeah, critique or something, you know, something positive.
So best feedback would probably be the colors in my images. I think that that's one of the things that as people always talk about my work, they're always talking about how three-dimensional and how the colors pop. So that's something that I've always just admired when people give me that feedback.
All right, without giving away all your secrets, though, how do you make that happen? I mean, because it's true. Color is it post? Everybody probably asks you, "Are you doing that in post?" And I know you're not because you've shown some examples of here's something straight out of camera. Here's the final piece. Tell me how you get the look, the famous Eli Infante look, in your work, without giving away all your secrets, because I want people to still come to your classes and watch your YouTube videos.
So high speed sync is definitely very, very important in that process because you're able to expose for the background and the subject at the same time. So that's already going to give you that three-dimensionality. And then of course there's going to be some post-processing aspect to it as well, bringing out the colors. But I think the biggest thing is training your eye, because a lot of people, when they think of, bring out the colors, they think of like, I'm going to bring up the saturation, and it looks almost too fake. And so you need to kind of train your eyes. And it's taken me like a year or two to really train my eye to know what the limits are of pushing it when it comes to color editing, and also just like skin retouching. There needs to be a nice balance between the two. And I think that that's where people are so frustrated and they're really impatient, is that they want to just get good at shooting and editing in less than a month. And there's this phase where you need to fail for like a good couple of months and just train your eyes to know where the correct balance is at.
Well, and you think you bring up a good point. I think people think there's a magic recipe or an action that you can apply to
Oh, yeah.
any situation, and that's just not, it's like when somebody asks me, all right, I got this strobe. I got the FJ400. What settings should I put my camera on, and what settings should I put my strobe on? Well, what's your ambient? I mean, what's the scene presenting? How's the scene presenting itself, and that's gonna dictate a lot. And then also, what's your vision, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes you want a wide depth of field. Sometimes you want a shallow depth of field. So there is not a single one-stop answer for that. And same thing with post. That's your years of just muddying images up with all those filters in Photoshop that has allowed you to kind of practice and see what the limits are. So that's I
Absolutely.
see editing very similar to shooting, right?
Absolutely.
Well, cool. So, Eli, thank you for your time today. If anybody wants to see some of your work, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Eli_Infante_. You can find me on YouTube at Eli Infante, or you can also visit my website, eliinfante.com.
And at the very least, if you're not following Eli, if you're the one person listening that's not following on Instagram, make sure you do that. But I know you've been a lot more active on your YouTube channel lately, which I'm enjoying, because you can look at an Instagram post and kind of like it, and then you're on to the next thing, right? But to fully see how Eli's doing some of these cool images, that YouTube page is really kind of taken off. So make sure you give Eli a follow over there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. That's the end of today's Photo Pros Weekly. We will see you next week with a new guest. Have a good week.